Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. As usual, if you aren't already subscribed, please consider doing so. I would really appreciate it, and also, as always, feel free to leave a comment and or suggestion down below about what you would like to see next. So for today's video, it's going to be a continuation of the Salesforce Visualforce tutorial that I did, I believe last Thursday. As you can see here, I created a playlist for you guys, just because all these videos, I guess, related to Visualforce will kind of piggyback off of each other. So if you haven't seen the previous video, you probably should, because I will probably be reusing a lot of the same code and components. So anyways, with that said, let's jump into it. So like I said, in the previous tutorial, we kind of just went over some very basic Visualforce tags. And I did promise you guys that we would start getting into controllers and all that good stuff. And today I think we'll start off with standard controllers. So let's go ahead and set up our project structure, I guess. You'll see here, if you watched the previous video, which like I mentioned before, you should. This is the code that we ended up creating. It's very simple. We introduced the section header, as well as the Apex form tag, the page block section item, and how all that works, as well as like the output label and the input text. And like I mentioned in the previous video, we couldn't yet utilize like the input fields or output fields, which are fields that are directly tied to an object's field in Salesforce. But now with the introduction of, at least in this video, of the standard controller, we'll be able to kind of do that. So let me open up the command palette, Command-Shift-P on Mac or Control-Shift-P on Windows, I believe. And I'm going to run the command create Visualforce page. And this is not really necessary, but I'm going to try to keep all of these different tutorials separately, just so we can kind of see like the evolution of the code, I guess. I think that'd be kind of cool. Anyway, so I'll title this one Visualforce Standard Controller, because we're going to learn about standard controllers today. And I'll just drop it in the default directory, that's fine. And you'll see here, once the command is done running, we have some standard boilerplate output put into our brand new Visualforce page called Visualforce Standard Controller. So what I'm going to do, because like I said, I'm piggybacking off the previous video, I'm going to go ahead and kind of just copy what we've made before, and we'll just paste it in here. So let's go ahead and hit save on that. And we'll even take it a step further and we'll just deploy it to our org. So I'm going to right click on that Visualforce page and I'll hit deploy source to org. And because I'm already connected to my Trailhead org right here, it's running the command and it's pushing it to forth. And like I said in my previous video and many other videos before that, if you aren't familiar with this Visual Studio Code setup, I made actually a few videos on this, and I'll leave probably the most recent video in the description box below in case you're interested in getting this type of setup for yourself. Anyhow, let's jump into the Trailhead org to see what this looks like very quickly. Back here, we are currently in Lightning, but that's not a problem. I'm going to go ahead and just go to, using the URL, I'll set /apex /Visualforce Standard Controller, because that is how we access that Visualforce page we created. And you'll see here, this is what it looks like. Not the best looking Visualforce page, but this is what we kind of have to work with so far. So let's jump back into a Visual Studio Code and start working with the standard controller. Very quickly, before I kind of get into standard controllers and even what they are and how it kind of fits into the whole Visualforce framework, I'm going to go ahead and kind of update the section header. Again, completely unnecessary, but you know, let's go ahead and do that just to kind of stay consistent. So Visualforce Standard Controller, and we'll leave the subtitle as this is very cool. Okay, that works. So onto the subject of standard controllers, and I guess more generally about controllers. So Visualforce itself, you can kind of think of it as a framework that is used to create an application that's essentially hosted on Salesforce. And I think most people kind of already know that. And the architecture it uses is kind of more of a classical MVC pattern, which would stand for Model View Controller. And the way you can kind of think of it is the model is basically the information, so your database. Salesforce kind of takes care of that for you by abstracting away, creating objects and then fields that you can then call or utilize, right, in your Visualforce and your Apex. The Visualforce itself, that would be what would be considered the view, which is what your user sees. And the controller is kind of like what connects those two portions together, I guess you could say. The controller is responsible for taking any actions from the view and then kind of processing them, and then if it's necessary, altering that data or the logic into the model itself. So let's kind of go into Google and pull up a diagram, I guess. So that might make more sense to what I'm trying to say. So I just Googled model view controller design pattern because that's kind of what it is. And if we go into images, let's see, you can see there's a lot of different diagrams. I'll kind of just pick, this one's fine right here. On the right hand side, you'll see here, this is kind of how the user goes about and interacts with it. So the user will do some action on the view page, but essentially what's happening is that they're interacting with, let's say, on our Visualforce page, which is the view itself, there is a save button, right? So you make a change to a field and you hit the save button. The moment that you hit that save button, it's calling some logic on the controller. And that controller is then responsible, hopefully, if your code is correct, for making the changes to the record on the back end. And that is the communication layer to that model. The model is kind of like the abstraction to your Salesforce database. Once that's done happening, then at least in the traditional Visualforce paradigm, you might see like a refresh, or you might have some Ajax or something. And then once that's done happening, the view will update. So the Visualforce page might refresh, and then you'll see the updated value of that field that you changed or something. And that's reflected onto the user. So I kind of hope that makes sense. I don't want to get super technical or nuanced into it. Just know that Visualforce utilizes the model view controller design pattern or framework, or whatever you want to call it. If you're interested in seeing more about this, definitely feel free to read up on it. At least personally for me, at least the way I see it, Salesforce is very awesome in the sense that a lot of this stuff, like the more computer science, technical stuff, it's a bit more abstracted away, so you don't really have to worry about it. Just as long as you understand these concepts, that there's a model, there's a view, there's a controller, and we can kind of interact with all three of those, that's kind of enough. So for us, today, at least, or in the previous video, we were mainly working with just the view because all we knew at that point was just some simple Visualforce tags or components, or wherever you want to call them. Today, we're bringing in this controller, which will also let us work with the model, which is the Salesforce database. So let's jump back into our Visual Studio Code, and hopefully my rambling made sense to you guys. So Visualforce actually, and Salesforce in general, there's actually a few different ways of utilizing the controller. We have what's known as a standard controller, and we also have standard list controllers, and we have custom controllers, and we have extensions for controllers. But for today, I want to just focus on the standard controller. And the way you can think about this is, for every single object that you create, or even any object that's standard in Salesforce, so think of like the account or opportunities or whatever, Salesforce automatically, for free, will create an Apex class that you can't really see, but we'll get into that in a bit. It'll create it for free that you can't see, but there's certain methods or functions that are available to you. For today, let's say we want to create a Visualforce page that will let us make some changes to an account or something, just to keep it simple. Because we know that we want to interact with the account object or account record or whatever it is, we will want to utilize the account standard controller. And to kind of indicate that, up top next to the Apex page opening tag, let's type in standard, and you'll see here we have this suggestion, standard controller. And all you need to type in here is just the name of the object. For account, it's just account. That's just a standard API name for the account. If you had a custom object, let's say we had like an object called ideas or something, it would most likely be like ideas __c to denote that it's a custom object. That's kind of what you would do. And like I said before, this may be a little confusing. When we say that it's a standard controller, we don't mean that it's only available to standard objects in Salesforce. The standard controller is available to all objects in Salesforce, at least as far as I'm aware of. And like I said before, Salesforce creates this for you, and you can't really see it, but there are some methods that are kind of universal and available to pretty much all the objects. Common ones are like there's the save function, there's the edit function, delete, and cancel. So basically, without having to write our own Apex code on an actual like Apex class and then referencing as a controller, we can make some changes and then just reference the standard save function and it would save it for us, which is kind of cool. So let's go ahead and just say we're going to utilize the standard account controller. And now, because we've done so, we can actually start working with other tags. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and change this first one to the input field tag. And when we have this here, let's go ahead and get rid of the ID. We'll leave everything the same here. But now we can utilize the value tag. And I'm going to set that and then use double quotes. And then inside of that, we want to use these squarely brackets. And basically what we're saying is we want to reference a field on the account object. And to reference it, we would use the exclamation mark. And then we would say account, like so. And then the name of the field itself. So let's say we want to utilize the, just get the account name, which I think that's how you do. Let me go ahead and double check that. So I've gone to my setup for the account object and we're just now looking at all the different fields. And let's say we want to just get the name. I guess that would be fine. So it'd be like account name, which the field name is just name. So we can just utilize that. So in our Visualforce, we should just be able to say account name like that. And I believe that's the correct syntax. So anyways, for now, let's go ahead and change the value of the output label to just account name like so. And then for the for value, we'll just change this to account name. And then like I explained in the previous video, the for attribute and the ID attribute have to match, which is kind of letting you know that the output label belongs to that input field like so. So let's go ahead and hit save and let's try to deploy this to our org. And hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. So let me go ahead and right click and hit deploy source to org. And it looks like we didn't have any errors. So let's go ahead and check our Visualforce page. I'll go ahead and refresh this right here. And you'll now see some kind of cool things happen, right? We made the change to our output label. And then now here we have this input field. But you'll see here that there's this little red bar right here. And that's that's indicating that this field is a required field, which makes sense, right? Because the account standard object requires you to have a name for your account or else you can't create it in the first place. So if we jump back into our Visualforce page to wrap this little portion up, essentially what we've done so far is we referenced a standard controller, which is the account, and then we referenced a field using this little syntax right here. And we didn't have to write any code ourselves to do a SQL query or whatever to reference that field at all. And because we're just kind of working with the simple stuff right now, we're not really going to have like a search mechanism in our Visualforce page yet. So if we wanted to see like, this information actually like populated for a record, we can kind of cheat a little bit. And what I mean by that is in the URL, we can kind of hack it a little bit and put the question mark for a param. And then we'll say the ID is equal to something. And I'll go ahead and go into just like a random account. And I'll grab the ID in the URL and I'll just paste it here and refresh. And you'll see now because we told our Visualforce page, or rather we passed in an ID to our Visualforce page, this field is now populated. We still can't do anything. Like I can change the field here to like compute inks with 2 S's, but I can't save it because we don't have that functionality yet. So let's go ahead and I guess change these two input text to input fields, referencing 2 more account fields. And then we'll add like a save button or something just so we can kind of like see one of the free methods, I guess, you get with the standard controller. So very quickly, I'm going to go back into my account object, fields and relationship. And let's say we want to display, like the phone field. And I guess maybe like the type field. Yeah, that works. So we'll say phone and type just to keep things simple. In our Visualforce page, we said that we want to display the phone. And right here, we'll just make these little changes very quickly, phone. And we're no longer using the input text. We are using the input field. And I guess if it's not entirely obvious, because perhaps I'm not explaining this properly, the difference between an input field and an input text like I mentioned earlier, is that the input field is tied directly to a field on a Salesforce object. Whereas the input text, you would use that when you want to capture some information from the user, but that information isn't necessarily tied to a Salesforce object field. And this might be useful, like let's say you want to get some information from the user and you want to like process it, or you want to do something before it, or you want to do something with it before, like, you know, then putting it into a field. Just to kind of let you guys know that. Anyways, let's go ahead and finish making these changes. So input field ID equals phone, and again the value, we'll use the syntax right here, squirrely brackets, and then we can't forget the exclamation mark, and then we're going to say account, and we want to get the phone like that. And because I'm lazy, I'm going to go ahead and copy these lines right here and just kind of paste it in here. And we said we wanted the type for the second part. So type, and type like that. Okay. So essentially what we've done is we've made 3 changes to our page block section items. We are now referencing fields related to the account object, and we don't only just want to display them, but we also want to allow the user to make an actual save, you know, or an actual edit to those fields and then save it. And an easy way to do so is to basically just have a save button on our Visualforce page and reference the save method on this standard controller object. And a way to do so, because we already have the Apex form tag, we don't really need to do much else aside from, let's say, instead of the page block section, I'm going to introduce another field or another tag, and this is called Apex page, I believe it's page buttons or page block buttons, like so. And opening, closing tag. And basically what we're doing is kind of similar to like a standard like record page where you'll see like the save button or the edit or save button up top and at the bottom. If we use these tags right here, page block buttons, it's basically mimicking the exact same functionality where you'll now see a save or edit or whatever kind of button you put at the top of the page and at the bottom of the page. And you don't have to write you don't have to copy multiple tags of buttons, everywhere on your page, on your markup. You just basically have to write the code once, and then your Visualforce markup engine or whatever is smart enough to know that you wanted to see the buttons at the top and at the bottom. So anyways, now let's go ahead and define the actual button. And this is a button called command button, like that. And this one we can just have the closing tag like this. We don't need to open it and close it. And this takes a couple of properties. Here is the value, I believe. And the value we'll just say is save. And then there is an action attribute. And this attribute right here is actually what should run when that code or that button is clicked. And what we want to run is just the save method. And the save method is a method that exists on the account standard controller. And I think that's the syntax. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've done this. But I think that's the syntax. So we have the value attribute, we have the action attribute, and then there's more. But for now, we'll just kind of keep it simple. Let's go ahead and hit save and see if we made any mistakes or not. I'll go ahead and deploy source to org. And it looks like I did make a mistake. And let's see. The mistake is that Apex page block must be the direct parent of page block buttons. So yes, the mistake is I put this inside the page block section when it needs to be outside of it right here. So my mistake. Like I've said before, I am no professional. I'm just some kid that learned a little bit of Salesforce and I liked it, so I kept going. Anyways, let's go ahead and save and try to deploy source to org one more time and see if that works. So now it looks like it successfully ran. So let's go ahead and jump into our trailhead org and let's go ahead and refresh our page one more time. And like I said before, because we did that page block buttons tag, we now have the save button at the top and at the bottom. And because we're still referencing this ID right here of this account record, we have all this information. Well, it turns out these fields are not populated, but we do have this. So let's go ahead and actually set the type to something. We'll just say this is a prospect. And let's go ahead and click on save. And you see when I click on save, it starts to refresh. And here's a kind of a, I guess, interesting quirk to know. You'll notice that we clicked save and it redirected us to the standard account page layout. And that is just the default functionality of that save button. And we'll kind of get into it, another, I guess, action that you can do to prevent that. But just know that by having that the action set to save, it'll make this save to that record that you're making the edit to, and then it'll redirect you to the standard page layout that you have associated with your profile or however you set it up in your org. So let's verify that change actually went through. We'll see here we have the type field, and whereas before it was empty or not populated, now it is set to prospect. So it looks like that's working itself. And just to kind of wrap things up before this video gets too long, like I said before, the save action, it'll basically save any changes, and then it'll redirect you to the standard page layout that you have associated with that record. But there is also another action, or there's many actions. There's like the edit action, the delete action, so on and so forth. And as always, I'll link down documentation down below in case you want to read further about what else you can do. But for now, the one I want to go through before we wrap this up is, I believe that is called the quick save. And to denote that, we can just use this wording right here, quick save. And like I mentioned before, quick save is a method that exists on the account standard controller Apex class that we can't actually see because that's just something Salesforce creates for us and we can't modify. So let's go ahead and change the value to, I guess, quick save as well, just to kind of denote the difference. I'll go ahead and hit save, and let's try to deploy it to our org. Hopefully we didn't make any mistakes. It looks like it's successful. Now let's go ahead and jump into our org one last time. And back in our Visualforce page, you'll see here I am still on this specific record. And now what I want to do is I want to give this a phone number. So we'll say 555-555-5555. I think that's correct. And we'll go ahead and hit quick save. So you'll see here when I hit quick save, you might have not noticed because of the screen capture, but the page was refreshing and then it finished refreshing, and now we're still on this same page right here. But if we jump into the actual record itself and we hit, let's look for the phone, and you'll see the phone field is still empty. But if we go ahead and refresh it, you'll notice now that the phone field actually has some information in it. And that is because of this quick save button feature, whatever you want to call it, that allowed us to input this information. But after it was done doing so, it basically let us stay on this Visualforce page. So I think I'll kind of cap it here. Hopefully all my rambling made sense to you guys. And like I said before, subscribe if you guys are enjoying or finding this useful. Leave me down in the comment section down below any suggestions or anything you guys want to see in the future. I'm trying to make as many videos as I can about everything I know so far. And like I said, I'm not an expert by any means, but I enjoy making these videos for you guys. So until next time, I'll catch you guys later.